I was browsing TikTok the other day and came across a pretty scary video captioned, "Seriously, never would I have expected to find this," and I documented all of it. Let's investigate. If you enjoy mysteries, true crime, disappearances, and conspiracies, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. I also have a Patreon and a PayPal, so if you're interested in supporting the channel, feel free to check it out, a link will be in the description. On the 3rd of March, TikTok user Samantha So, we'll call her Sam, posted a video titled "A New York City Mystery." Sam explains how she recently moved into a new apartment in New York and noticed that no matter how high she put the heating, it was always cold. When she walks to the bathroom, she feels cold air blowing on her as she's in the doorway. It appears the air is coming from the hole in the door frame where it closes, if that makes sense. I don't even know what that bit's called, but you can see it in the screenshot on screen now. So Sam tapes up the hole, but there is still cold air blowing from somewhere. As she stands in the doorway, you can see her hair moving slightly as if there is a draft. It's not coming from the vent near the ceiling, a slight draft is coming through the light switch, but not enough to really be noticeable. Then Sam figures out the air is coming from the mirror, which moves. In part 2, she removes the mirror from the wall to reveal a large hole in it, which leads to a whole new room. In part 3, she climbs through the wall, taking a hammer as a weapon just in case, and part 4 shows what she found inside. There are a few rubbish bags on the floor, as well as a water bottle, and it appears that what Sam initially thought was just one room turns out to be a whole apartment. She looks around, then goes downstairs and sees an open door, which explains why it's so cold in there. She then locks the door, gets out of there, and replaces the mirror over the hole. She ends the video with a note, "My landlord's getting a really fun phone call tomorrow." At the time of writing the notes for this video, there are no more updates. Sam has liked comments and replied to some since, so she is still alive, which is good. But that's pretty terrifying, and I don't think I'd be staying in that apartment after that. I hoped when I first watched it that the rubbish bags and water bottle were from some time ago and that no one had been there recently, but one comment pointed out that the water bottle has a green band at the top of the label, indicating it's a new type of recycled bottle which was released only about a month ago. Someone suggested putting a fine layer of flour in the doorways and waiting to see if there were any footsteps, which is a pretty good idea, but I guess we'll have to see if Sam decides to do that. The unlocked door would also suggest that someone had been there recently, but I really wanted to know where that door led to. Was it another room, another apartment, or just out onto the street? From what we've seen, there are a couple of possible explanations for what's going on here. The scariest one is that someone is spying on Sam, possibly the landlord, in which case calling him about it would probably be the worst thing that she could do. I really hope she just ended up calling the police instead. The landlord having something to do with whatever is going on would explain the hole, which there seems to be no other logical reason for. It makes sense that the landlord would be aware of this, it is his apartment, and surely he visited between tenants or at least had the place checked over. The temperature and the draft is surely something that they'd want to fix. Or even if they were one of those landlords that just didn't bother fixing things, they had to at least be aware of it. I just think it's unlikely that the landlord wouldn't know about it, whatever its purpose. Another possibility is that the hole was at one point used for someone to spy on a previous tenant, but since they moved out, the apartment was abandoned, and maybe homeless people have just used it as a place to stay overnight since, hence the water bottle and rubbish bags. The apartment doesn't look like it's actually lived in. There's rubble on the floor and the only signs anyone has been there is the rubbish bags and water bottle. The door being left open suggests someone either just popped out or the place has been abandoned. Someone has to own the property though, and there's no obvious reason why they'd leave the door open rather than lock it from the outside, which could even suggest that whoever has been there recently entered through Sam's apartment, as there are no other obvious entry points, though it's hard to say for sure from the information we have. It's also possible that the previous tenant of Sam's apartment made the hole with the intention of spying on the next tenant through the apartment next to it, but as I said before, I find it hard to believe that the landlord isn't at all aware of the hole, so it should have been filled before Sam moved in. One comment suggested that the place was just being renovated, but that wouldn't explain the hole in the wall. If people were renovating, there is no way they wouldn't notice that, and if they did notice, why is it still there, or why has the landlord not notified Sam about it at least? Even if the landlord isn't up to no good himself, surely he's obliged to at least inform a tenant about the hole, if not repair it. Especially if the door in the next apartment is left open, it's just a disaster waiting to happen. If the place was being renovated, you'd also expect that she would hear construction noises too, but she doesn't mention anything like that. It looks like some kind of attempt at renovation took place there at some point, but there are no obvious indicators that it happened recently. Someone else suggested that it looks like an illegal conversion, like the whole thing was just one big apartment and it got split into two without permission. Someone claiming to be an architect corroborated that, saying it has signs of an illegal conversion. I'm not an expert in that, so I can't confirm or deny, but it sounds like a somewhat plausible explanation for the state of the apartment. Maybe the hole could have been a window between two rooms or a hatch or something, and the landlord just hasn't got around to filling it yet. Obviously that is pretty shady in itself and potentially dangerous. If the conversion is illegal, it's impossible to know whether the renovations would have been done to a standard that would be required by law. And we don't know who the intended residents are. That could bring further problems. There is a possibility that this is a hoax. Sam isn't exactly acting how most people, myself included, would act. If I found a hole in the wall behind my mirror that led to a whole new apartment, I would freak out, get out of there as quick as possible, and call the police straight away. Not put the mirror back and settle for calling the landlord the next day. And I'd recommend that anyone else do the same in a situation like that. Even if it turns out to be less nefarious than it seems, it wouldn't be worth that risk. Even if this isn't some creep who's spying on Sam, it could be someone who's planning on stealing from her or doing anything really. Either way, my mind would jump to the worst, and this is definitely a situation where you'd be better safe than sorry. But Sam just seems kinda chill afterwards. I'm amazed as to how she even went in there. She didn't just poke her head round the corner, she literally walked in and down the stairs. Anyone could have been there. The apartment itself is obviously not a hoax though. I guess we don't know for sure that it isn't part of her apartment and she just set it up to look weird. Or even that she owns the apartment and created this just for a viral TikTok. It seems a bit of a stretch though. Maybe I'm just gullible. But I don't think whatever is going on here has just been staged for a TikTok that may or may not have ended up blowing up. I guess there's a chance that there's a logical explanation that she was made aware of when she started renting the property, and she's just hyping it up for a video, but it's impossible to say. And even if there is an explanation, it's still a potentially dangerous situation if anyone could access the apartment and get into Sam's apartment. So this is a pretty scary mystery. I hope Sam is okay and that she updates us if and when she finds out what on earth is going on. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think someone is spying on Sam or was spying on the previous tenant? Or do you think there's a reasonable explanation for all this? If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday for a new video.